I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you for joining. I am recording. I want to open up. Many of you already know with some sad news, and I have been given permission to share. And I see people like Ron Thorgmartin on here, old clients of our team. Many of you may recall or may know Scotty Carper, who was on our team for a while. Scotty worked with our team after he was sentenced to 24 months in prison. I'll never forget him calling because he was so upset that he got designated to Leavenworth in Kansas. He was so upset because he lives in California. He wanted to go to Lompoc. And I said, this is really great news for you because you're going to do the drug program. They have it at Leavenworth. He had a very popular newsletter and he joined our team when he came home. And unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago, he passed away. No foul play, as I understand it. He just had a bad heart, and he went to sleep, and he didn't wake up. And there's going to be a celebration of life next month. I believe I'm going to attend in Northern California. But many of you knew Scotty, and I wanted to share the news with you. I liked him very much. He had a way about him. We actually had a nice process. I've been writing a new book, and every week he would review the chapter, and he was very critical of his feedback. And I said, I really appreciate your honesty and directness. So I'm going to miss him very much. I wanted to relay that news to all of you. As we continue, for some reason, I'm unable to share. Perhaps it's because Tayana's controlling this right
I
now.
had to take control to
Okay.
give mics. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No problem. So now I'm able to share. Some updates on the .org. Michael's continuing to do his work in the prisons and jails. Today he's back in Victorville. And then he's going to be heading, I believe, to Terminal Island, which I actually read is going to be closing because it's an old dilapidated building. And rather than repair and fix it, as I understand it, they're going to be closing Terminal Island. So Michael's continuing his advocacy work inside of the prisons and jails and pushing for more expansion of earned time credits under the First Step Act and more policies like earning freedom, going directly to home confinement. And he's confident, based on what we're seeing or he's seen in the Bureau of Prisons, that we're going to see more of these changes during this administration. So it's essentially you're continuing to build and prepare for what it is you want. And I know if that's sentencing, a shorter sentence, and an earlier release from prison if prison is part of the sanction. Before I get into some of what I wanted to cover, are there any immediate questions that I can answer? Anything that's popped up in your life, both good or bad, that I can address, hopefully provide some value to any of you? Ooh, stale that coffee. Okay. No? Okay, good. Well, if you have anything you'd like to say, I encourage you uh, to to chime in, to ask, to leave a comment, raise your hand, and to the extent that we can help, uh, we're we're going to. Okay. Now, I wanted to spend a few minutes on best ways to prepare for sentencing. But of course, like anything that I convey around sentencing, it's really going to be applicable to trying to get out of federal prison early as well. Although we are creating a specific asset for post-sentencing in ways that people stay in prison longer, a lot of these same lessons are applicable uh, to uh, to all of you, wherever you are in the journey. So Tayana and I had some fun over the last few weeks or so. We worked on a little manuscript together that we call 14 Costly Errors That Lead to Longer Federal Prison Sentence. And whether it's a federal or state defendant, I see someone on this call who's fighting a state case in Florida, the same methods or suggestions we have apply. And one thing that I wanted to do to kind of make it fun was apply some of these lessons to a lot of the literature that I like to read. So a book that I read called The 33 Strategies of War, written by Robert Greene. You likely know Robert Greene, who's really famous for his book 48 Laws of Power. And I was reading the book on a plane back from Northern California, and I thought a lot of these laws could be applicable to someone preparing for a sentencing hearing. We've addressed it before, and we covered more of it inside of this manuscript. And to help make the point, I've been to around 1,500 sentencing hearings or so. I pulled out my own notebook and I wanted to insert some of what I've learned from those sentencings into this manuscript. So I'd be grateful if you have questions, chime in. If not, my goal was to go through some of these lessons with you because, it can be a difference of 18 months or probation or 3 years in prison. And of course, we'll circle this book around to everyone when we send out the the webinar replay. Okay. So let's just jump in. It was something we frequently hear, mistaking silence for strategy. And through the 33 Strategies book, he calls it the polarity strategy. Pick a side and commit, split messages, destroy credibility. And I'm hoping this will be somewhat engaging. So if you can chime in and share your insights or expertise, that would be helpful. But I find a lot of defendants, they wait until the last minute to try to influence a judge, and they haven't really developed a record that shows why they're a candidate for the judge. With all due respect, I actually see someone on this call who like 5 months ago was on a webinar and said they were going to do everything to begin building a record for sentencing. And then I spoke with that very cool guy a few days ago, and I'm like, what have you done over the last 5 months? He's like, I'm just waiting on my lawyer to give me discovery. And it's like, the DOJ's been working full time. They're preparing for trial. Your bank fired you. You have DOJ press releases. You
Can't
continue to
find them
send money
guilty.
to lawyers. Fine. And yet, over the last 5 months, you haven't done anything to demonstrate why you're different than the government's version of events. You're going to get a longer sentence. Fine. Which is why this webinar is of no value unless you actually implement it and do something. We'll see. And we give everything away for free. Go to .org, learn how to create, learn how to write, use tools that will help show why you're different. But too many people mistake silence as a strategy, which is why I started off here. So part of what will help is maybe you'll see the consequences that follow. So for example, Judge Boone, a video with Michael Santos, you can watch the interview, told him, you are creating your own evidence for good or bad. The PSR puts a human face on the individual. If I don't see responsibility there, I assume it doesn't exist. Judge Bennett said, so often defense lawyers just go with the government's offense conduct statement. They don't spend enough time with their client to contest it or tell the defendant's point of view. Can someone tell me how you can convey your point of view in a probation report? How does that work? I know the answer, and my goal isn't that I just speak here for an hour. I can. I'm recording it. This is great intellectual property for our business, and we're going to recreate it and put it in front of more people. So I can talk forever. I don't want to. So, can someone tell me how you can get your own version of events in the probation report? How do you do that? What's the first step? Oh,
Get your narrative submitted.
so even
Right in
thank
there.
you. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Here's what you do even before that. And this happened. We talked about this earlier on our weekly client call. By the way, if you're a client of our team, make sure you reach out to Tayana because every Tuesday at 9:30 Pacific, we have a client call, which is a little more intimate, and it's not recorded, and I'm able to kind of get into some things I can on a webinar that everyone can access. You've got to make sure your lawyer knows what you are doing. So on our client call earlier today, someone in our community said they're facing a sentencing hearing of January. They're getting sentenced January 20th, which means the sentencing memorandum is going to be turned in maybe the 13th or the 14th, which means this defendant should begin to get vested in the memorandum like in early January. What's in the memorandum? What makes it unique? Why is it not boilerplate? In this book that Tay and I wrote, we go through specific quotes from judges who were like, you gave me 80 pages of boilerplate nonsense. It's a quote from a judge. You gave me boilerplate. There ain't nothing in your record that shows why you're a candidate for leniency. I don't care what's in the memo. So the first thing you need to do before just turning in a narrative, quiz your lawyer. What do you think of the narrative? Why did I write it? How should we use it? Before you plead guilty, while you're negotiating a plea, what did I do? Why did I do it? What are the nuances of my crime? It's the reason most people get plea agreements they don't agree with and they call us to lament. It's not fair. It's not right. Why isn't it right? I don't know. Ask your lawyer what you did. They can't. To the degree that you can, you didn't advocate. So before you just get a narrative to the probation officer, make sure one of your primary stakeholders, like your lawyer, is in a position to explain it. No one's going to work harder than you, though most people, they just get the order all wrong.
Go work
And in
harder.
this book, I go through a specific quote from Judge Boulware, a judge from Nevada with whom I spoke, who said the order of mitigation follows: defendant, lawyer, friends and family. They all get it wrong. Lawyer, friends and family, defendant. I would do it differently if the goal is more liberty. not just a shorter sentence, but if you want to get out of prison earlier because you have a case manager and a judge and a probation officer who are going to rely on what you do throughout the entire journey. So, the best advice that I could give all of you is do not embrace this silence as a strategy. I got time. I'm going to go through discovery. I'm going to wait. Because what happens is you get a situation like this. A New York doctor, Tay, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. A New York doctor was looking at 47 to 54 months. When probation called, he gave one word answers. The report called him minimizing. The judge quoted that word out loud and hit him with 54 months, the top of the range. Let me repeat the word minimizing. See, when you spend 7 minutes preparing for a probation interview and your lawyer tells you to keep your mouth shut and not say anything rather than identify with victims and lay out a plan how you're going to make them whole and you'll never return to another courtroom and you're part of the solution, as Judge Boo told Michael. If you don't do that, you get a report that says minimizing, you get 54 months in prison. We can compare that with a physician in the same district months worked on the sentencing or the letter, got it to the probation officer, before even that, to the lawyer. No excuses. Yes, he scratched a huge check for restitution, never talked about the money. In this small book, I describe how people think cooperation and scratching a check is going to keep them out of prison. And they all ignore when I interviewed Paul Bertrand, the FBI agent who arrested me, who said one time in his years as a senior FBI agent, cooperation kept someone out of prison. But some people think they're different, the anomaly. Why? Because their lawyer said so. Yet their lawyer, a former U.S. attorney, still asked for prison when they were a U.S. attorney. Now they're a defense attorney telling their client it don't matter, you're not going to go to prison. It's inconsistent. Let me be more directed. 50, let me just be on. It's hypocritical. It's insane. But you should do what you think is best for you. I don't mean to be sarcastic. I don't mean to be disrespectful. You are in crisis. You're looking at prison, or if you're already going to prison, you want to get out of there. The question is how. Better messaging. The lesson, if you don't prepare and tell your story, someone else will. And you won't like their version. Does anyone here like their Department of Justice press release? How many people truly agree with their plea agreement? Few. I'm encouraging you to do it differently. So I'm hopeful as you'll go through this asset, you'll begin answering and asking questions. If the judge only had your words, would they know who you are, what you learned, and where you are going? What's one thing you can create today that proves you're more than bad decisions from your past? This is the type of thing a probation officer wants to hear, that needs to be written out, and it needs to be built and developed over time. Because even after you're sentenced to prison, if you get sentenced to prison, you're going to want to get out early. A judge can help that. A case manager can help that. A probation officer can help that. But not if they think you're full of make-believe, which leads to error number 2. And if you have, I'll go through one more, then maybe there are some questions. Building a case around excuses, not change. I've been doing this a very long time. You know that, 16 years. And I have heard a lot. This is exactly what I said when I was a defendant. I didn't have bad intentions. I was under pressure. I trusted the wrong person. These judges hear this every single day. I mentioned Judge Blumenfeld, a judge in Los Angeles, because I heard a defendant one time say to him, I didn't have bad intentions. And Judge Blumenfeld went crazy. He was irate, and he's a really like mild-mannered dude. He's like, didn't have bad intentions. You're educated. You have a master's degree. And I'm sitting there with an apple in the back of the courtroom thinking, oh, this is about to go bad. This is how sentencing goes bad. And selfishly, I'm thinking, this is going to be a great video. Didn't have bad intent. You have a master's degree. You went to prep schools. You made a lot of money. You didn't have bad intentions. Let me tell you about the person who I have sympathy for. The meth dealer I just gave 15 years to who did, it's like, holy good God. 3 years becomes 5. So what I want you to do is embrace this idea. If you say but or however, I didn't have bad intentions, I was swept into this, it might make you feel better, but it's a recipe for disaster. And what's interesting is how many people actually say, I would never say that. But when you dig further, that's kind of what they're saying. It's just cloaked a little bit. We should just embrace that. They don't outright say it, but it's kind of there. So in this video with Michael Santos, Judge Booth said, if your kid throws a baseball through the window and says, I'm sorry, that's one thing. But if they're busy cleaning it up and not blaming Bobby next door, that's real remorse. Judge Bennett, good allocution takes responsibility, talks about the impact on victims and includes a solid plan of rehabilitation, what they think they can get out of prison programs and what they intend to do when they get out. So here's a couple of examples before I ask some questions. This is someone who, if I said the sky was blue, he'd say it's orange. And he was didn't listen to anything, didn't listen to his lawyer either for transparency. A Boston securities broker faced 37 to 46 months. He used his PSR interview to argue about the unfair DOJ press release. It was unfair. Probation wrote defendant downplayed seriousness and shifted blame. That's all the judge focused on. Gave him 46 months in prison. Had he said nothing, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again, I accept full responsibility, he had a judge in Judge Gorton that would have given him 37 months. Sometimes it's best to say nothing. Keep your mouth shut. If you aren't going to embrace the best message, you might have a sympathetic judge who gives you the worst case, you want to get the low end of the guidelines. The wrong message led to 46 months. And it continued. He's had a miserable experience in prison. Miserable experience in prison. 46 months feels like 15 years for this guy. Now let's talk about someone else. A Dallas CPA in the same range volunteered early. Why is that valuable for volunteering early? Can someone tell me? Why is that valuable starting early? I'm begging someone to chime in and tell me. I'll tell you. So judges, I think, over the last many years have become more cynical. I just feel it, like I sense it at all of these hearings. And many of them don't do what Judge Wilson did at my sentencing hearing in 2008. When my lawyers mentioned that I volunteered, you know what he asked? Well, how long? What was the frequency? Over how long a period of time? What was the result? What was the impact? Most judges don't do that. At least they didn't back then. You get a letter from a nonprofit, the lawyer references it in the sentencing hearing, in the sentencing memorandum, done. Now, Judge Blumenfeld just did it, Judge Carter did it. Many others will inquire into what that community service actually looks like because sometimes they feel used or you're trying to exploit a nonprofit 10 days before sentencing to get probation. So the reason you should do it the earlier the better and document it is because you look different than the guy that goes to the soup kitchen twice and is trying to get the same credit as you. That wouldn't be fair. And the onus is on you and your lawyer to convey the impact of the nonprofit work, whether it's a shorter sentence, clemency, pardon, extraordinary and compassionate release, get enough supervision early. If you've done the work, you should get credit for it. The onus is on you to convey that properly. And more judges are inquiring. I know it's come up. It's upset some judges who feel it feels like they are using this nonprofit and they really haven't done the work. Of course, some judges aren't going to care. I find many do. So this CPA, he begins to volunteer, but here's what he did differently, and which is what I would encourage some of you to do, even if you don't agree with it. He used the DOJ press release as a learning lesson for his children and made sure his case study was authentic, meaning his life story, his narrative, no defensive, no excuses. He had a short plan about mentoring others before his release. He might have been at Montgomery with Ron. The judge gave him 24 months, did the drug program, and he got out just after 9 months, or right after he completed the program. He got kind of lucky. He went in and they let him into the next RDAP class. He got kind of lucky, frankly, and they let him out. He went to the halfway house. The point is, you can't argue your way into leniency. You've got to show it. You've got to build it. You've got to demonstrate it. Apologies mean nothing until they show up as work to repair damage that you have caused. And if you've pled guilty, that means you've caused damage. And if you pled guilty and there isn't a perceptible victim, that means the United States of America, every citizen is a victim. As hard as that might be to say, that's the appropriate message. So I encourage you as you go through your own analysis, whether you're going to prison or you've already been sentenced, is there anything in your vernacular that sounds defensive? Do you spend more time explaining what happened, or are you working to repair a crisis you helped create? What's something that you can do today? What can you create today? With that said, I'm not going to go through all 14 errors today. I'm going to go through a couple of more, but I'd love for someone to chime in to see if this resonates at all or if this sounds insane to some of you. I'd love for someone to go ahead, Stephen. I see you.
Hey, Justin, how are you? Hey, my question is about the probation aspect of your remarks. It seems like the probation would happen after sentencing, correct?
There's several stakeholders. Okay, you're going to have a pretrial services officer who will lay out the terms of your supervision before sentencing, how often you can travel, weekly check-ins, approval, things like that. Then you are going to have a probation officer that is going to interview you, preferably in person, though sometimes it's done over the phone or via Zoom. That probation officer is going to write a comprehensive report called the probation report. That report is going to recommend how long your sentence should be. It's going to go through your background, your crime, mental health issues, medications, substance abuse. It should lay out a vision of what you're doing moving forward. Where many people make a mistake is they sit there and they don't say anything. They don't know how to respond. They don't understand their talking points. So they get a report that just mirrors the government's version of events. And that's what the judge is going to rely on. So part of why we talk about persuading people or influencing people is because this probation officer is going to recommend how long someone should serve in prison, which is why it's a good idea to get some of your own messaging into that report and the judge can see that message in your own words. Then, like we had a call earlier today, we have some people in our community sentencing's delayed another year or two for myriad reasons. So if you get that narrative to the probation officer, guess what? The judge is going to read the probation report and see that you took the time to write it. But in this book, I share a quote from a judge that said, at sentencing, I want to learn something that's not in the probation report. There's a golden opportunity for you because you can say, Your Honor, I did the probation report 3, 6, 9 months ago. Since then, here's what I've done. Here's my updated asset. So you're kind of connecting the dots. That shows how you're using your time productively. So that probation officer, it's a big deal. They're going to be at your sentencing, and it's not uncommon for a judge to ask them questions during the sentencing hearing. I was in a sentencing hearing last year in Boston. The judge asked the probation officer 10 questions. When you come home from prison, you will have a separate probation officer that will oversee you on probation. The work that you do now influences the level of liberty you will have then because they're going to review the record you've built during this window, which is why, back to error number one, people delay in creating. They are silent or they stay quiet, and it just hurts them later on in the journey. So there'll be a few government officials, but two probation officers, one before and one after. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, Mike, can you right now, I it seems like it's the judge and the DA and my attorney that seems to make the deal. The probation officer hasn't even been called upon. Is that accurate?
It's accurate that your lawyer will negotiate a plea agreement with the U.S. attorney. It's accurate that you won't sit for a probation interview till you've pled guilty or been convicted at trial. The point that you could be missing is what are you doing through your own efforts to try to influence the plea agreement? What does your lawyer know about the offense? What are the nuances that could compel him to negotiate a better plea? So it's interesting, the YouTube algorithm, like 8 or 9 years ago, I filmed this random video called Is Your Lawyer an Order Taker for the US Government? And I filmed it because so many defendants would call and be like, my plea agreement isn't accurate. They put in stuff there that isn't true. It doesn't really reflect what I did. I'm like, well, does your lawyer really know what you did? And they're like, no. Well, it's like, well, then how can you negotiate the best plea for you? So if I were you, what I would have done differently, I would make sure that the lawyer knows every nuance, every detail, every motivation, with hopes they can convey that and get the best plea agreement possible. So you should be influencing what comes, but you will not meet with the probation officer till you plead guilty or convicted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see some questions. I see some hands up, which is wonderful. Why don't we start with, I don't know, we'll just go random. Let's start with Cheryl, I think. Cheryl, are you there? If you'd like to speak, please unmute yourself so we can keep flowing here.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Sorry about
Don't be
that.
sorry.
Anyway, I'm from Canada and I've done my time. But what's coming up is repaying back the debt that the for the fraud, right? So I if I don't pay it back by end of March, then I have to face 3 years in prison.
For some reason, I feel like we've connected before. Have you been home for several years?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
Right. So, okay.
And I've got a job now and I
I,
work like
I understand.
so.
So you live in Canada, but the restitution is to the United States, correct?
No, it's restitution in Canada as well.
Right. So, a couple things. I wanted to focus more on pre-sentencing in this webinar. Two, for total transparency, the United States would not send you back to prison if you couldn't pay restitution unless you lied or hid assets, which some people do, and they've gone back to prison for violating. I don't know Canada, and I don't know if they're going to send you back to prison for not paying or making payments. So it would be inappropriate for me to comment on another country. We've had many people in our community who are Canadian get sentenced to prison, but this is the first time I've heard of them wanting to send you back. So I'm just not in a position to answer, other than I would do all you can transparently to avoid going back to prison because you haven't made payment. I'm just not in a position to provide value.
Okay. Thank you very much, Justin.
You're very welcome. I just want to be clear
Okay,
there.
that honesty is important.
Okay, so
Yes.
I see. I'm happy to answer another. Let's go through a couple more hands up. Art, did you want to contribute? Art's a retired warden from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Welcome. Happy Thanksgiving, Art. What's going on? If you want to unmute yourself, I think.
I just
Okay.
did. Uh, Something you said very, very early, Justin, that I want to reiterate. When you get your DOJ letter that goes out to the public in the newspapers and everything, please take a look at that. If there are victims identified in the letter, then if you can do something to work on the issue, and I don't mean giving money to the victims. That's not what I mean. But I work continuously with a guy by the name of Percy Pitzer, who does the Pitzer Education Foundation. And his premise is that if we can stop the cycle of incarceration through people who are, in fact, um, victims in themselves, that we can help stop this cycle of incarceration. I use that as an example. But if there are some ways in some community organizations that you can work toward a victim's situation, it goes a long ways with the judge. And that's all I wanted to
Yeah,
say, sir.
I appreciate you sharing that. And you're absolutely right. That's the Art is a retired warden with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I'm grateful that he contributes to our community. And what he just said is consistent with what we cover at some point in this book. And I'm going to share it with everyone so you can read it. It's just 60 pages. You'll get through it in 60 or 90 minutes. But similar to what Art just said, there was a defendant in this book who, just before sentencing, made a very large restitution payment, but the judge felt it was very transactional and done so in a way without a real focus on any of the victims, but done so in a way as a mechanism to avoid prison. And I can't remember exactly which heir it was, but his whole narrative, his whole sentencing statement was the effort and expense he went through to get this money. And of course, you know how a judge is going to respond to that. That's an obligation you have. Any effort and expense is because of a mistake that you made. In no way does this, are you identifying with the victims? Because even if a victim gets all of their money back, there's still pain, there's shame, there's heartache. Um, I know that from my case. Right? Every victim got their money back, and I used to think like, what are they so pissed off about? Everyone's been paid back, and UBS paid their legal fees too. So a lot of times the victims will get their money back, and the lawyers take a third if it's done on contingency. In this case, not only did they get their money back, the lawyers' fees were paid. And I'm like, what's going on here? Why are they so angry? Well, they were hurt and they were stolen from, and it disrupted their life, time they can't get back. That's the appropriate message. And the earlier you can identify with the victim, look at number 4, waiting till sentencing to show remorse. Judge Boo, I can count on one hand the number of times I've been genuinely moved by an apology. Judge Bennett, when I ask if they want to speak and they look at their lawyer like it's the first time they've thought about it, that conversation should happen before sentencing. So I want you to give thought to something that Michael talks a lot about, timestamp. Can you timestamp? Is it timestamped what you've done? Is it documented anywhere? Can you show it with a stakeholder? Like, when did it start? What was the date? So to that person I see here, we spoke 5 months ago and we just spoke again. He's like, I haven't done anything. I'm still waiting on discovery. My God, imagine what you could have timestamped over the last 5 months. Would you be stronger? Probably. Why haven't you done it? I don't know. Fine. And perhaps when you see some of these case studies, I take responsibility, but the judge stopped lifting after the but, gave him 37 months. And compare that with someone who actually volunteered, timestamped the hours, lawyer filed the memo. The PSR described him as genuine and proactive rehabilitation, gives him 21 months and 5 months to surrender to Lompoc, where he is right now with my good friend Matthew Boyer. They become friends. 5 months. Let him stay out for his daughter's graduation. Thanks, Your Honor. I'm very grateful. He earned it. Ironically, he wishes he went in earlier because he'd been getting credit for it, but that's a whole other dilemma down the road. Usually when you're sentenced, you want to get time started. The point is, are you doing that? Okay. They are sentencing, as I wrote, what you can verify. Judge Boo, you've pled guilty. You had 90 days. You could have reached out and had justice on your own. You don't need me to do it. None of this is about you. It's about the people you've hurt. And to Art's point, when you start identifying with people harmed, when you start identifying with people harmed by your actions, it's unfortunate how few people actually do that. And you know what? I was one of them. I was one of them. And it's the reason I got 18 months in prison. When if there's any dude that probably should have avoided prison, it's me. And I interviewed the FBI agent who arrested me, who said the same damn thing on a webinar. And I went to prison. I realized I wasn't alone. Okay, let's go to some questions that we have here. And Art, thank you for contributing because that aligns exactly with what we're striving to convey. Whether people do it or not is up to them. We'd love to help or just use our free stuff, but this is the message. Christian Rodriguez, good to see you.
How you doing, Justin? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I want to get some insight from you regarding someone who's on pretrial. How would they present a release plan? Like at which point does that come in?
Yeah, so we discussed the kind of timing of how to use assets a little earlier today. Um, we have to understand what the Bureau of Prisons is striving to do. The Bureau of Prisons believes more people should get earned time credits. We are seeing some prisons close. They've made changes or policy adjustments of trying to move people to home confinement from the halfway house, stacking credits. I know it's not happening as quickly as we would like, but these things are ongoing. That's what Michael's advocating for. So we're trying to compel not just a case manager to release you earlier. We'd like to use a release plan as an asset to demonstrate to a judge, this is what I've done throughout this whole time, Your Honor. After getting indicted, I needed to get a new job. Here's the job. Where are you working? You get a letter from an employer you can build into the plan. I'm earning an income as a law-abiding citizen. I'm paying taxes, right? So when people ask me, hey, my sentence was delayed 6 months, is that good or bad? I'm like, I don't know. What do you do every day? If you're productive and you're building that into a plan you can share with a stakeholder that shows, hey, I'm law-abiding, I'm home, I'm compliant, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, it probably makes you a stronger candidate to get a better outcome. What too many defendants do is like this executive with whom I spoke 5 months ago, and I won't mention his name, and I don't want to call him out. But like 5 months ago, nothing. 5 months later, nothing. And I can tell based on our call, nothing's changing, regardless of the facts that I'm putting in front of you. So 5 months later, nothing. That's a 10-month window. So when you go to a sentencing hearing, like, why is he a candidate for leniency? Like, why has he earned it? Why is he a candidate to get a sentence below the guidelines? Because his lawyer said so? Okay. I know the lawyer. It's a good lawyer. But is that it? I know what the prosecutor is going to say. So you put a release plan to say, this is what I'm doing. And when I come home, this is also what this is what I'm going to do. It has to be plausible. I didn't write about it in this book, but Judge Bennett also told Michael how he picks apart allocution statements. When people say, this is what I'm going to do when I come home, Your Honor. And he's like, well, why haven't you started it? Okay. You're going to do this when you come home. If I give you probation, I'm going to give you the outcome that you want. You had a year to work on this. We actually saw some of that in the Varsity Blues case, where a lot of parents said, give me probation and I'll do this community service work. And the judge is like, what are you, nuts? I'm not. Judge Telwani and Judge Gorton said the same thing. You've had all of this time. That's why a release plan would be valuable for a judge. I'm not talking about it, Your Honor. I'm doing it. And whether you give me probation, home confinement, or prison time, I'm going to continue to build. But it requires work. And some people don't want to do the work. Thank you for the question. I hope you found that helpful.
Yes, sir.
My good friend Michelle actually said something that I should know the answer to. Michelle, you asked about commissary. I believe in November and December during holiday season, they increased the commissary by $100 a month. So that's why it might have gone from 360 to 460 during holiday season. But I believe commissary is still 360 starting in January. But I will get confirmation. In fact, I should probably ask my partner, Michael, who's in every prison. He'll know the answer. I promise I'll have the answer before our call tomorrow, Michelle. You have my word. Okay. But I think it's just 100 extra during holiday season.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, there you go. Sean just confirmed. So I see some hands up. Sean, if you'd like to contribute, and everyone can unmute yourselves, and I'll work my way around.
Yeah. So another thing in regarding, look at it this way: you've built your record to get an indictment. So you have all of this time. If you are lucky enough, the first time I went to prison, I served the first 19 to 20, I think it was about 20 months in a detention center. So I didn't get to build a record showing the judge that I'm, changing the way I do things. So if you look at it that way, if you're out on pretrial release, if you're facing a sentence, build your record by, like you said, timestamping and documenting everything you're doing, because the government is using all of the discovery that they have against you to try to get the sentence served to where you're going to have to serve the sentence. So use this time to build a new record to show the judge that you are changing and what your plan is for when you get out of prison.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly right. To the extent that you can show that you're part of the solution, it helps. And I know that the more authentic you are, the judge already knows. They've read the probation report. If you're rich and you have resources, the judge knows. You can't come off in front of the judge as some pauper, like, no, own it, acknowledge it. Acknowledge you've had resources, you've had opportunities, and don't run from it. Be proud of it. You've worked hard to accumulate it. They're not going to punish you for it. They will punish you if you don't identify with victims, perhaps recognize you knew better. You had opportunities that others in that courtroom didn't have. If you are unable to be aware of that, including with a case manager in prison, there are people that go to prison for sentences and within a week they pay a lawyer to file a compassionate release request. Do you know how off-putting that is to a case manager? To another prisoner who's been in for years? Who's working their ass off? They're not getting a compassionate release. You don't file within a week to. No, if the judge wanted you home, he'd have sentenced you to probation or home confinement. He factored everything in at sentencing. You got prison time. You don't immediately file for a compassionate release or run to your case manager's office and say, I got a year and a day sentence. And did you know the law allows me to be released tomorrow? They know the law. I assure you, I would do it more strategically. Before you ask for anything, you develop a record, you share it with them. And in this book, if you read it, you're going to hear judges say, I only hear from a defendant when they want something. Shorter sentence, a redesignation, get off supervision early. It's opportunistic. It's kind of why they went to prison in the first place. Not my words. It's coming from a judge. So I would take that into your calculus and say, you know what? I want to do it differently. And differently isn't doing the bare minimum. I've avoided disciplinary infractions. That's not extraordinary. I went to programming. So what? You're supposed to. And they think you only went to get your first step act credits. You've got to approach sentencing and a case manager from what do they expect you to say? Then you've got to do the complete opposite with assets. And you know, that's that 10 people tend to get better outcomes when they do that. Okay. Let's see if there's any other questions here. Gabe, if you'd like to chime in. Gabe's only been to 74,000 sentencing hearings in his lifetime. He averages 17 a day. And go ahead, Gabe. Good to see you, my friend. I've offended Gabe. He's no longer with us. Gabe, talk to me. Gabe, we have a good flow. I need you to talk. I need you to talk.
Hey, Justin, can you hear me?
Yes, who is that?
This is Michael.
Oh, hi, Michael. I thought you were
Hey,
Gabe. I got thrown off for a moment. Go ahead, Michael.
question. If I'm working full time, do I still need to find time to volunteer? I have five
No.
kids,
Yeah.
so I just,
I'll tell you that the if people have asked me what's more important, volunteer work or working, I say both are great. There's nothing more important than working
No.
and building a new record. I hate to say new record because I think some of these indictments are so ridiculous, and I see so many friends on this call that should not be going to prison. So I want you to know when I say build a new record, I'm saying this from the perspective of what a judge or case manager wants. But I see friends on here that do not need to build a new record, and they never should have been indicted, and they shouldn't be going to prison. So I want to be like really clear about that. So I'm approaching this from a messaging perspective. But I have like 4 consulting calls tomorrow with clients and friends. None of you should be going to prison. It's sickening. I want to make that very clear. Working is more important because you're able to pay taxes and demonstrate to a judge, I'm earning a living as a law-abiding citizen. Here's the record that I'm building. So if you can do both, you should. But there's nothing more important than supporting your family and working. We had someone during COVID who couldn't get a job. He literally couldn't get a job. It was a high profile case and it was COVID. You couldn't leave the home. And he went to his probation interview with like 59 employment applications that he had submitted. It actually got into the report and the judge commented on it sentencing. That's humbling for a guy that has a master's degree to apply for jobs. It's something that's below his skill set and he still couldn't get hired. So it's more important, dude, that you're working. What I would do now, besides going through I know we have to have a conversation. Besides going through the probation report course that you have, it's really vital that you create this first person case study or narrative. And we're going to have a conversation. Our team can help you create it. But it's really vital that you get in on the record what you're doing. And if you continue to work and be productive through sentencing, you can then update that narrative. But it's that work through your own efforts that really influences not just the sentence, but early release opportunities from prison. Okay, so keep working and doing what you're doing, but now it's time to begin building assets. Okay, I think we lost him, but I think he got it.
I
Okay,
got it. Thank you.
all right, and I know we have to have a call. I'll be in touch to have that call. Okay,
Sounds good. Thanks.
cool. So Gabe, if can you unmute Gabe? I thought you can unmute yourself. If you can unmute Gabriel,
I can
Tayana.
suggest him to unmute, but I can't unmute him. Like, I can, propose it to him, but he needs to press the button himself. I don't know. He
Got
seems
it.
muted right now.
Okay, so but before we do that, let me comment on Sharita. Sharita, are you still there? So, Sharita, if when you write, how do you look for ways to give back when there is no victim? I don't need to know the details of your case, but I know if you're pleading guilty to some white collar crime, and as I recall, maybe from last week or two, you might, unless you go to trial, you can always maintain your innocence and say there were no victims. But if there's a chance you plead guilty, there could be a victim. The taxpayer can be a victim, having to use resources to investigate you as a victim. Um, you plead guilty to a tax crime, there are victims, American citizens who pay their taxes. It furthers the bureaucracy. It costs money to investigate. So it's always essential to identify some victim, whether it's perceptible or not. Do I look for nonprofits that help victims just the same? I don't know. You don't have to. I would Do something that's measurable, that's specific, and shows that your contributions are improving the lives of other people. Prisonprofessors.org is an option. There are myriad options all across the country where you can contribute and provide value. How do I build a plan to get started today? As I recall, Sharita, you asked that question 2 weeks ago, and now I'm going to answer it again today. It's the same exact answer. It's the same exact answer I'm going to give 2 weeks ago. Hold on. Pull out a piece of paper and write something. It's December 2nd, 2025. I never imagined I'd become involved in a government investigation. It's difficult. I don't agree with the government's version of events. My life's spiraling out of control. I want to lead and do better. So I'm writing this to identify some things I'm going to do in the next month. I'm going to have that difficult conversation with my lawyer. I'm going to invest the time to write out my life story that shows why I'm different than the DOJ indictment. I'm going to begin to lay out a vision of what I want to do if I face a sentencing hearing, starting with what I'm doing today. Who am I? Where am I from? How did I get here? What am I going to do moving forward? So how do you begin to build the plan? You just work, as Michael encouraged me to do in prison. You can do it online, digitally, you can write it out, but at some point you're going to share it with someone. AI is a tool that you can use, though I've spoken with stakeholders from the government who know that defendants use it inappropriately in a boilerplate type way. And it convinces many of them that the defendant doesn't really have the skill set. They can't defend it. They can't back it up. It's just words. And I cover that in the book too. So you want to use tools like AI, like an accountant used a calculator when it came out, but it can't replace how you think and what you're actually doing day to day. And in the book, I share an example of someone who wrote like an 80-page memorandum. And the judge is like, looks great. Like, you didn't do it though. And that's the problem in this era of AI. It can produce it for you, but is there a record that justifies what you said you did? If not, it's just words on a page. And we had a case manager on from Yankton who said exactly that. We've had wardens on who have said exactly that. It's just words. It's all make believe. There's no real evidence of it, which is why you have to get out and do it. So I'd begin writing today, Sharita, and share it with people. Ask them to hold you accountable. Gabe, if you want to ask that question, we're here. I think. I'm ready.
He just needs to make sure the correct speaker is chosen on the audio for Zoom.
No problem. We're already at 11:50. This is what I want to go through one more, and I will send this book out. I hope you read it. And I'm really grateful for Tayana for investing so much time with me to create it. Because many of you know when someone schedules a call with our team, Tay has that first call and she just asks questions. So here's what I believe to be one of the biggest errors. And this is where I'll close. Failing to understand what judge values. That is a typo. There needs to be an S there. Tay, we need an S. I can't add the S. I can't. Okay. What judges value? I hate typos, damn it. So you know that whether you like your judge or not, they've built their career, you could argue, on discipline, education, public service, and accountability. Have you identified those values? So to the person with whom I spoke 5 months ago, and again a few days ago, I know your judge. I know his values. Have you shared those same values? Do you mirror those values? Because you don't need to be a social scientist to recognize we identify with people who have similar or shared values. Who do you associate with every day? Who are your friends? Who do you spend time with? They tend to have the same values. Well, according to this really great book, Persuasion, and we've done myriad webinars on that, we emphasized, according to the author, Robert Cialdini, and as a reminder, the book was so valuable that Charlie Munger of Berkshire Hathaway, who died a couple of years ago, sent 1 share of Berkshire Hathaway stock to the author as a thank you. And he said, this book has helped us make billions of dollars. Here's 1 share of stock as a thank you. It's now valued at what, 800 grand? We emphasized that people were most likely to be persuaded by those we identify with. It's human nature. We respond best when we feel connected. That's why your judge's background and their values matter. Have you shared them? I'm begging you to share. I can assure you, anyone working with our team in a pre and post sentence capacity in content that's created shares their values without question. A Chicago investment advisor copied another defendant's narrative. I'm afraid to tell you he probably copied it from something that we created because we put so much content online that we give away that someone think they can just take it, switch a few verbs and an adjective, and get it to a judge. And the judge called it boilerplate. Judge knew he wasn't authentic. Something was missing. Yeah, there's no record to defend what he wrote. 37 months. And last case study I'll share. Someone in our community, he researched the judge, went to some of his sentencing hearings, kind of hung out in the back of the courtroom. But this judge discussed mentoring, education. He wrote a very long letter around those themes. He spoke with me at USC Marshall School of Business, my alma mater. The judge appreciated it, called it thoughtful, gave him a year and a day at the camp in Florence. He was home in 4 months. If you don't know what moves your judge, you're guessing. If you don't know what moves your case manager, you're guessing. So what has your judge done? When you get to prison, rather than complain and lament over the unfairness of your sentence, listen to what your case manager says. When prisoners walk out of his or her office, what are they saying? She hates me. She likes me. I'm getting more or less halfway house time. Listen, study, evaluate. That's how I'm going to wrap that up. Stephen, I'd love to hear from you, and then we can go to Violet. And I've been speaking since about 5:30 a.m. I'm wrecked, but we have work to do. So let's go. Stephen, please contribute.
You don't sound hoarse. You sound good.
Thank you.
Okay. Just a little question. Actually, this is just a statement about probation officers. I'm just off about 10 days off of home confinement, starting probation. So I've had multiple situations that I've been together with my new probation officer. He's a good man. He's tough, but he's fair. One thing I will say about building your record at prison, he hadn't heard a word from prison, even though I've been actually home confinement for the last 6 months. He didn't know who my case manager was. He did not get any of the information from the courses I took, which I gave him copies because I saved them. The work that I had done at Elkton, I saved it and took it home and gave him copies. And he was very happy to have that because that was the only evidence he had of my record while I was there. So while you're in prison, save copies of everything you can so that you can give yourself the best chance when you get out.
It's a really wonderful point because it ties into everyone in our community who's going to prison. So as many of you know, when I was in prison, I hired Michael to help me write lessons from prison. And I'm very transparent about that. And about a week or two before I left, Michael said, "So what's the plan? What's the implementation plan?" And he said, "This asset is of no value if it just sits in your garage. What is the plan to distribute?" And it's one thing to have an asset. It's another thing to get it in front of the appropriate stakeholders. So something we discussed earlier today, sharing these assets kind of depends on the length of your sentence. So if you have a year and a day sentence, you're not going to bombard your sentencing judge with this because you're not going to get a resentencing, and odds are you're not getting a compassionate release. You can share with the judge 3 or 4 months in. If you have a 4-year sentence, you may want to share with the judge 8 or 9 months in, and then a year later, you might apply for a compassionate release under the First Step Act. So everyone has a different timeline. To Stephen's point, you are weaker if you work your ass off in prison and build a record. I mean, there are people in our community who are working with the nonprofit and Michael to influence millions of people. It's real, it's documented, it's specific. Some of that work is going to lead to UCLA and Northwestern doing evaluations on our program so we get evidence of how many people graduate, reduce recidivism, drop security levels. It's a really big deal. we think you're weaker if your probation officer and judge doesn't know about it. You're still helping people and there's value there, but it's okay to also say, I want this to help me too. And that's how people in our community, in some cases, have gotten, we talk about clemency and pardons. It's not make believe, it's real. So whether it's pardon, commutation, clemency, many of you have heard me talk about Jerry Lundergan, convicted at trial, didn't change what he built in the pardon he got from Biden. Here's Michael and Jerry in Kentucky. And in the pardon from the Biden administration, they reference his volunteer work with the nonprofit. You can't fake it, but he did a wonderful job of sharing it with stakeholders, with his judge, with his case manager, with people in his community. You can't fake it. So what Stephen said is correct. You got to make sure people know, or you're going to be judged the same way as everybody else. And I hate to, that's not really fair. If you're doing everything right, and some guy does nothing all day, like that guy shouldn't get the same treatment as you. That's what prison was like when I was there. It didn't matter if I worked all day with Michael or watched the Kardashians all day. There was no First Step Act. Nothing was advancing my release date. Zero. It didn't matter. It's different now. Laws have changed. We want you to benefit from it. So it's a very valid point, and that's why we got to document in build for years and years to come. And that's also how reputationally you overcome, because you begin to put new assets that you create on top of what the DOJ said, and it's real. You don't run from it. You're able to say, this experience has turned out to be an asset in my life. I'm using it to help people. Great. That's what I encourage all of you to get towards. Yes.
May I say one comment before we
Yes.
sign off? The gentleman who said that that the probation officer didn't have any information regarding what he had done and what he had not done, I would only tell you that there are good case managers, and every case manager is supposed to tell that probation officer that in a progress report. There are not so good case managers. I won't say bad case managers, but I'll say not so good case managers. If you have somebody who is not so good case manager, take it upon yourself to get the documents that you can out of your central file and send them to your probation officer before you are released.
That's exactly right. And we talk a lot about that in sharing the assets with people. You can share your .org profile. Some people in our community actually work on a manuscript or write a book. They have an Amazon page. They could share it, very easy to distribute. It can be one of many steps in what you're building. So you're right. You do want to share it. You can also just ask that it become part of your central file. And therefore, all stakeholders can see it. We interviewed John Gustin, who worked with the BOP for a long time in the halfway house and home confinement as a leader. And he always suggested every team meeting asking the case manager to put what you submit as part of your central file. And therefore, stakeholders are able to see it. So thank you for confirming that. Violet, why don't we wrap up at noon with Violet? Good to see you.
Hi, thank you. It's good to see you too. My question is, how can we research the judges? What platform does everybody use, or is there a?
So I think the first step is, asking your lawyer, do they have any experience with this judge? Can they share it? Pacer's another option where you can log in. Attending some of those sentencing hearings is a good idea, but I understand if you're outside the state, it's a little bit harder. Just going to good old Google or even AI to see if there's any comments out there, or recent rulings from this judge. So you just really get creative and get a sense of what he's done. But the best way is to ask the lawyer. Most lawyers in a federal case in that district have been in front of that judge before. Like when I send a referral to a lawyer, it's because I know they have experience in that district with that U.S. attorney and that judge. You need the nuances. You need to know what motivates them. Even a case we had last year, the lawyer, she said, this is a really good U.S. attorney. It's favorable for us. And I kind of think with this new administration, she's going to get fired or resign to become a defense attorney. So I want to try to push up the sentencing because I think we're going to get more love. And it's like, cool. It wasn't delayed. And our client got sentenced. Could have delayed it. We didn't. He got sentenced early in front of Judge Holcomb in Santa Ana. So there's value. You want to kind of get a sense of what the U.S. attorney and judge is like.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, cool. So here we have it. It's 12:02. I'm going to end this and hang up on all of you. I'm going to get the replay up in a couple of days. If you have interest, I'll send the book out that Tay and I wrote. We really hope you find value in it. And we're so grateful that you are in our community. It's such a pleasure to know you, to work with you in any way that we can. And we're always going to be here to support you. And we look forward to seeing you. I hate saying as a speaker. I hate it. Damn it. I look forward to seeing all of you next week. And to those of you with whom I have calls, I look forward to speaking with you very, very soon. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Great
Thank
to
you,
see you.
Justin. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.